But cool. Are we good to go? Actually, everyone have a drink. I'm a bit under the weather, actually. I'm not an alcoholic. This is just water. I love that we all drank and Luka didn't even move. I thought he'd lost internet connection. You're made of sand. Sand, I tell you.
Don't insult my internet connection, okay?
Hello and welcome back. And that is right, it is, let's face it, the diamond dogs of NAS at this point. It is SpaceRex up there. We've got Will from SpaceRex. We've got Frank from Wundertech. And of course, we have Luka from Blackvoid. And we've got together today to, of course, talk about the change by Synology in their hard drive policy, the drives that you can use in the 2025 generation in the Plus series moving forward. Now, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff in this, largely based on the feedback, not only from my video, but their videos and articles as well. I recommend you check those out. They're all linked in the description. And we're going to sort of go through the main salient points there. I've got a bunch of notes that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. And I know, this video going out NAS Compares, you know my opinion on this already. But just to quickly summarize, at least from my point of view, straight away, I think this whole thing is being designed to increase profitability of the Synology Plus series. The fact that they didn't add third-party SSDs is kind of a silent hope in the distance, but it's something they'll probably clamp down on. I think the whole messaging for this has been garbage. It's been garbled. It's been awful. I think the fact that they're citing statistics that haven't really been laid out in white papers or anything like that, it's sort of annoying for me. And the idea that we're going to hopefully see drives added to a verification list when devices released in 21, 22, and 23 that didn't support third-party NVMe SSDs as storage pools have still yet to have that feature is a slightly telling, worrying thing. But that's really it. For those that aren't already aware, at the moment for that 2025 series, if you try to use non-Synology verified drives, you can't even set the system up. You can't get into full initialization. So straight away, going through the questions, right now we're going to head over to Luka over at Blackvoid there, who is an official Synology partner, hence why we've given him this horrible question. What do you think is the logic and reasoning behind this change by Synology in how drive verification is being conducted?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me again. Difficult question for me, but again, I'm just going to say it out as from my personal point of view. Okay, so regardless of my relationship with Synology and ins and outs, but this is only how I see things. And you actually touched on several points that I wanted to make. Starting off, the communication on this announcement and the rollout was, I'll say, it was bad. It could have been done better. There could have been at least a couple of more paragraphs in that announcement regarding third-party drives, whether or not there are actually coming, when, how the verification is going to be performed, etc., etc. That's one thing, but the main way, the way I see it, second point that you mentioned is obviously profit. I mean, we basically can't run away from it, right? Synology is a company just like any other company, and they're in to make a profit, right? So it's basically something that they decided not yesterday. They probably decided this 5, 6, maybe a decade ago. Basically a trajectory where they want to end up today. And this is actually something that we're seeing that started 5, 6 years ago with the enterprise drives and then now being pushed out. So basically profit as one topic or one bullet point to all this. Another reason, again, my opinion, is basically compatibility matrix. Synology has a wide variety of devices. There are a lot of vendors for hard drives. All those vendors have a very large set of drives to offer, SSD, NVMe's, etc. And when we combine that and when we multiply all that, I'm guessing Synology is investing or spending a lot of resources, money, person day and everything in order to test all those drives in order to get them to the compatibility list. Considering again that they're basically moving into enterprise. Yeah, they're kind of turning back on, in a way, turning back to enthusiast level, or basically people like us that were that for the past 20 years brought Synology to where it is today. It kind of feels like they're making a U-turn and forgetting about prosumers, about enthusiast level. But again, it's a company decision, and they decided that they probably want to leave a relatively saturated space, particularly now with uh, underdogs coming in, with some companies that have been on the market, which are maybe not so broad, not so enterprise oriented as they are. And they're basically maybe leaving that spectrum of market to them. And their Synology is focusing on more enterprise and business segment. As such, resources are obviously important for any company. And probably apart from profit, I would say that testing compatibility with third-party drives is a way for Synology to save on resources and basically free up time for their developers and their operations, etc. And maybe they will simply offload that task to disk vendors, right? So they're basically gonna uh, give that job in a way, in sense, to WD or Seagate and whatnot, and basically tell them, look, this is the compatibility procedure on board, and we'll add you to the list. Again, my opinion. Obviously, if there was some more information in that announcement, maybe we would know it officially. But again, this is just my opinion. And finally, what I think is also something that has a certain history to it. If we all recall, end of DSM-6, Synology started cleaning house. They started to simplify things in DSM. They started completely removing support for third-party applications, not the ones that they are actually supporting, like certain packages, but pure third-party. They're also deprecated certain applications of their own, or basically combined multiple applications. So they also pulled out from DSM certain functionalities and turned them into a dedicated application like FileStation, like SAN Manager, etc., etc. So obviously, from my point of view, this started some time ago, and they started probably with software. They were streamlining the DSM. Then they basically also created Synology account, a portal where you need to register your devices in order to get support, in order to basically eliminate Xpenology users for any official support, etc., etc. So for me, there are multiple angles where Synology was coming from, in order, and that basically brought us today, right? But definitely, one last thing that I would like to mention, which is again related to profit, is I'm pretty sure Synology is not going to let go of their relationship with Toshiba in terms of hard drive sales, because I'm guessing sales are going very good from their point of view. So them prioritizing their own brand of rebrand of their hard drives is definitely going to continue. And in terms of turning towards enterprise customers, or more enterprise or higher business customers, it's definitely going to be a turnkey solution and a much more streamlined solution for the customer and for Synology as well. So that's for me.
Cool. I mean, again, that was lengthy, man. Fair play. I mean, Will, Frank, anything you'd like to add to that?
My sneaking suspicion is that there is some legitimacy when they brought in the enterprise drives, and that there's Synology drives back really long time ago. There was some random issue with like a really specific version of Iron Wolf drives that I have no clue why or how it was incompatible or what happened with the SATA bus, the entire SATA protocol that would allow this to happen. But there was a very specific version of Iron Wolf drives that did genuinely have issues with Synologies, and only a few models of Synology. I have no clue what it was, but I do remember having a client who literally the drives would not work with, like end up crashing and having a lot of issues, and it was just super niche. And I think that's kind of where that seed started. And then I think the reason they've introduced it into this lineup is I really think that they have a serious issue with their kind of product here, because in all honesty, a DS1821 can manage most people's businesses. Like most high-end users can run off of that. There's enough compute in there to push through just about anything. And the fact that you can load that thing with 24 terabyte drives makes it a very hard selling point when you're looking at like the 3622X Plus or any of those other rack mount units, when it's like, hey, I can do it in an 8-bay with these cheap drives, throwing it together and getting a much smaller unit. So I think the reason they've included it down to the Plus models and not just the larger units anymore was because they were just kind of getting outclassed by their own product here. And it's almost an effort to support those higher end units to make it so that you push people up to the higher tiers. Because otherwise, there was just no reason to go up to those models, even for businesses with a ton of data, because it was so easy to go with these massive drives. So that's my suspicion as to why they did it. It's because Toshiba is not able to produce 20 terabyte drive or 24 terabyte drives. And so they almost have to have a way of artificially keeping the enterprise drives or enterprise units better.
How about you, Frank?
I think from a reliability perspective exclusively, it always makes more sense to manage the entire process. So you have the device, you have the hard drives that go in the device, you can manage the firmware, you can manage everything. And at that point, you don't have to worry about what user is using what hardware. So this user is using Western Digital, this one's using Seagate, like all that stuff gets thrown out the window. You have one device, you know exactly what they're going to be using, meaning it's going to be one of a few different hard drives or whatever. And at that point, it's easier to manage from a reliability perspective. The problem, I think, comes in when you get into this category. So to Will's point, even if they did that for, let's say, the 8-bay NAS devices, it would probably be easier to understand from a consumer perspective. But when you shift over to every, 9 or 25 plus series device has these requirements, yes, it's easier for them to manage. Yes, it's probably better from a reliability perspective, but it is harder, I think, for just the ordinary user to understand that and get behind it, I guess is the best way of saying it.
I actually think it might be easier to have a blanket policy that rather than like, hey, well, if there's this, and if it's an XS Plus, I do actually think from like a blanket policy perspective, it can be easier almost of just like, hey, Synology is now on this little island where it's like a Dell, it's like buying an HP server. If you throw in your own stuff in there, it's going to complain at you. And it's really kind of that like full system where now it's like, I think they've said they're going for just an appliance now rather than an actual like build it yourself device. I do think there's actually a side that's almost easier, especially if you're getting somebody upgrading. Now there's not as big of a barrier to them upgrading from the 4-bay to the 8-bay or to the 12-bay, because now they just take their drives and move along with them. So I think it actually might be easier in that case.
I mean, one of the things I touched on, last week,
Go for it.
that one of the things about the messaging on this, that this is going to sound a bit extreme, but I wish Synology had either maintained the existing status quo for third-party drive support up to the 25 series and didn't change it, or just went militant. And I think you've touched on this in your video as well, Frank. If you're going to go down this road, commit. Just lock them, pre-populate them, because this grey area in the middle is how these misunderstandings have occurred, these difficulties. And I think if they were going to go down this road, if they've gone with the whole salami tactics and go for it bit by bit, they should have just gone all in, because it leaves too much ground for, there was an article on CashM yesterday, a French NAS website, I don't know if you've seen it, and he reported on there that using SATA SSDs, you could initialize a DS925 Plus because SATA SSDs weren't affected. And it was these weird little gaps in the system like that. And if they just went in and locked it, pre-populated, And the other thing is, within that grey area, if they go, nope, 2025, we're revamping the compatibility, I totally see I see the benefits for them, and I see the benefits to a lot of that tier, that sector of the market. But when your hardware is using the same hardware as several different previous generations, it does undermine the we haven't checked and verified this hardware argument, when that hardware has been so ruthlessly and continuously verified over the last few years. It does ring quite hollow. Sorry, Frank, I interrupted you earlier.
No, I was basically going to say something similar in that I completely agree with that. I think where this falls short is that it's a version of that, but it's not that. It's not a lockout. It's like, hey, if you need to initialize a new storage pool, you have to use Synology drives. But if you're an existing Synology customer, you can bring your storage pool with you and you can migrate it. But then the problem with that is that ultimately what you're really saying at that point is that you can bring your storage pool if it is the same size or smaller than the device that you are upgrading to. So then it's like, well, that's another thing. It's not if you're an existing Synology customer, it's if you're an existing Synology customer with a storage pool that's smaller than whatever NAS device you're buying. And it's like, there's so many little things here and there where it would, I feel like, be better if, to your point, they just said, we're locking everything out. That's it. You have to use Synology drives from this point forward. And at that point, it would be a united front where they're just saying, this is our new policy. You can't get around it. And here it is. But unfortunately, it sounds like there are ways to get around it. And then that brings other questions like, okay, so then what about the reliability on those devices? Are you not concerned? So you're not concerned about existing devices that migrate. Why wouldn't a new device that doesn't migrate with the same exact hardware have a problem? It's like, it just adds too many questions. So I completely agree. I think they should do that, but it's not entirely what they did, I guess.
If I can just, I definitely agree with everything that was said by everyone here. There are gaps. I mean, considering that 925 model has started to land in people's laps now and started to arrive at the doorstep. So we'll definitely see a lot of hands-on situations, but there are gaps. I think that Synology was not able to completely lock everything, as you suggested, Robbie, because the onboarding process moving forward is still unclear. I mean, I would bet, even just by visiting certain sites, that people have already tried and succeeded in initializing, right, with third-party drives. So that kind of puts the question up front: how are they actually going to double check whether or not the device is compatible? Is the future DSM update maybe going to do a different lockdown mechanism? We don't know yet, right? But presently, from what can be read on the internet, is that not much has changed, right, in terms of unlocking third-party drives, etc. So initially what this means is that basically if you have an X25 device and you're running an unofficial drive, you don't get support. That's it. It doesn't mean that everything else is not going to work. It will work, but essentially if you start knocking on support, you won't get any. So that's presently. But what will happen in the future, that remains to be seen, right?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm actually a fan of that side of things. Like, if you're going to allow people to SSH in and can break through the law, the boundaries, those people, you shouldn't try to block those people. Anybody who does that knows they're not going to be calling support. They're not going to be doing that. And such a small part of your customer base is going to be able to do that. And is going to feel comfortable deploying that with massive units. Like, I really would not. If a business asked me to, I would, but I would really recommend against it, right? Because that's just not the sane way of doing business. But for home users who want to tweak around and mess with everything, I feel like it's such a small part of the actual total people. And by locking it down, you can cause so many worse issues where maybe volumes become unrecoverable and things like that, because you start trying to mess with MDADM and now you're having real issues. I just feel like it's way easier to say, hey, this is the policy. You can't create it through the UI. If you figure out the back end to make it work while SSH again, good on you. it's in your hands now. And I kind of like that kind of policy, because it just means that the people who really need it for some edge case can do whatever they want to.
Cool. I mean, I'm leading on to the next question. You've sort of touched on this already. This one was going to be for you, Frank, and that was going to be, how could Synology have improved this rollout, messaging, implementation, this? How could they have improved it as far as you're concerned?
So it's interesting, because when I first heard the news, I didn't think it was a problem. I didn't intend on creating a video, an article, and I meant it at the time. Like, I'm not getting involved in this because I feel like there's too little of information. It's all leaks. It's all speculation. But as time went on, it went from little information to more information, but then that more information ended up, leading to more questions. Generally, it leads to more clarity, but in this case, it led to more questions. So it was one of your videos, Robbie, that I was watching, and that's what kind of shifted me, where I think Synology could have gotten ahead of it themselves. So they could have said, we're going to come out with a press release and we're going to lay out everything. It's going to be detailed. There's going to be no questions after you read this. You're going to have every single answer that you need. But unfortunately, what happened is that's not the case. So what happened is social media ran wild. And it's like, people are creating videos. There's more speculation out there. There's still little information, but every day that goes by, more information is coming to fruition, and that information is not necessarily ideal. So where I ended up having a problem with it is that, and by I say problem, I mean where it flipped from, this is something where like, I don't want to get involved to this, where to I should possibly say something about it just to provide a different point of view, I guess, is when it came down to that compatibility list. And the compatibility list was Synology devices. So from that perspective, if you say that you need to certify drives, and I said in my video, I can't imagine that it's endurance testing, because it would be too short for endurance testing, number one. And number two, it would take, like you said, 291 days to actually verify a drive if you're going with one drive for that total time. So we're talking about batches of 5, 10, 15, however many that they want to do, whatever it is. From that perspective and that perspective alone, you would think that when a compatibility list gets released, if there are third-party drives that will be approved at some point, it probably should have had a third-party drive on it. It should have had like a WD Red Pro or a Seagate Iron Wolf Pro, one of the higher end, consumer grade NAS drives, which small businesses use and home users use. Because then at that point, you're saying, hey, yeah, there's every Synology drive. You use every single one of those. But at the same time, look, there is a third party drive. So we just got to give them some time, and they're going to get to it. And there's going to be a good chance that your drive will end up being on that list. And that one little tiny thing alone could have spun the entire narrative. But at this point, and when I say this, I mean, it could have changed while we're on this call here. But at this point, it appears like there was a brand that was approved, and the type of drive is not as important. So the brand, Synology branded drives are fine. Now, whether that's because of their firmware and whatever they do behind the scenes to validate their drives, that's to be determined. But when you shift from type of drive to brand of drive, it gets to be a little bit more confusing, because if you're saying that your firmware, you're testing and validating your firmware and you're confident that it's always going to work, well, then what happens to the firmware that exists on a Seagate Iron Wolf drive? It could change. So you have one today and then you buy another one 2 years from now, it's a different version. What happens? Are you certifying firmware versions? Are you certifying the type of drive and not the firmware? Because if it's the type of drive and not the firmware, then that goes back to the point of like, well, then why did you certify the brand and not the type? It's like it led to so many questions that I felt like that's when I got to the point where I'm like, I should make a video. So at least at this point, and this point alone, I could say, well, for home users, I'm doing my part because I'm a home user. I guess you could consider me a small business. I don't consider myself that. I'm a home user, but I have a Synology NAS. I have Seagate Iron Wolf drives in that Synology NAS. I'll upgrade to it or migrate to it, if you want to say, technically. But if I was a consumer off the street and I had a Ugree NAS or a TerraMaster NAS or a QNAP NAS and I wanted to buy a Synology NAS and I couldn't use my drives, well, I don't know if I'd buy it. Like, am I going to just throw those drives away? Am I going to use it as a backup? I think it just added so many questions that they should have probably planned it a little better. And I understand this is a very, very challenging thing to communicate. I don't know how I would do it. I'm giving you a very small sample size of my opinion on it, but that doesn't mean it's right. I have no PR experience. I have nothing. I'm just telling from my point of view, like, if you want a specific narrative to be said, you get ahead of it. And then if you say there will be third-party drives, you do your due diligence to approve one third-party drive. That's it. We need one third-party drive that will be on that compatibility list. And then at that point, everybody has a sigh of relief where you say, hey, look, they already approved one. If you have that drive, you're good. You don't have to worry about it. Give them some time. They're going to get to it, but they have to go through their process. Without that, I think it's very tough to take that as anything other than a possible downside as a home user, possibly even small business user.
Awesomely put, man. Okay, Will, Luka, any points to add?
Absolutely. Like, and this is where I think if y'all have dealt with like Synology in general, Synology, I think, is kind of, from the understanding I get, is a very fragmented company between their different, like, Synology Asia, Synology US, Synology Europe. Like, it feels every time I work with anybody very, honestly, fragmented. And it's just like the fact that, oh, a random German newsroom post went out before everything else causes so much unnecessary confusion. And I feel like they just do not really have the infrastructure in place to send out a united, hey, this is a really big deal. This is our company changing policies. Let's go in. Let's get all the marketing people from every single Synology company and all the different headquarters together. We're all going to have a unified approach, and we're all going to make sure we publish our same articles at the same time, because this one is a really big deal. This is a huge thing. We got to get it all unified and like have a simple answer. And that's just not what Synology is very good at. I do not get the feeling that they're very good at marketing and creating these united fronts and explaining something like that, because you get things that trickle out from all these different groups, and it causes confusion. And I absolutely agree with you. Having a really quick, hey, before we go in and we update these pages, to like kind of ease everybody into it, we're going to go through, we're going to work with these drive suppliers, and we're going to get a couple of these approved. And that way, the entire story is spun to, hey, it's there, but we're carrying over the entire compatibility list from the 923 plus or the 1821 plus or whatever, because they have the same CPUs in a lot of these cases. Okay, we're going to do that. And then at least you've got a starting place, rather than having all of this chaos and just no clue what's going on because everybody's just translating a German newsroom article.
Yeah, definitely. I can't say anything more because Frank and Will both said everything. I think my first point was the way this was initially communicated, which was, again, in my opinion, I think we all agree, wrong. And like Frank said, it was just, you woke up and it was fire everywhere, on Reddit, on social media got exploded, FU here and left and right, and it was horrible. So for the past 2 weeks, it was really, really tougher than it should have been, in my opinion. I won't iterate what Frank and Will said. Spot on. So not the best rollout, especially because just 8-9 months ago, we had a similar situation with Video Station being deprecated as part of DSM security update, right? It was like a 6th bullet point. Oh, by the way, we're killing Video Station. Okay, move along. So that was also, from my point of view, it was really bad. But this is next level, right? I mean, locking down and playing with compatibility, that's definitely something, like Will said, get everybody set them at the same conference, Zoom session, whatever, define a date and just explain how the rollout should be done. So Yeah, not nothing more I can say on that.
Like the only other thing I would add to it, again, this is kind of alluding to something I'm going to mention in another video soon. This whole thing has felt like it has been an accelerator has been pushed out of nowhere internally at Synology. Like all of us have been following the brand for a long time, and we've seen there's a relative pattern to their hardware releases. 2.5 years in some cases, 5 years. Some go with if you look at when DSM-4 went into 5, went into 6, the sub revisions going into 7. There's a familiar pattern that they seem to probably have in-house for a roadmap. And then in, what was it, January, February, suddenly a huge pile of hardware got leaked at a Synology event. And I say leaked, they allowed people to take photos. And all it smelt of to me, even at that time, was why has all of a sudden this brand suddenly gone balls to the wall in terms of its hardware releases, in terms of its everything's going at 95 miles an hour. Is it is this a tariff thing? Is this the brand suddenly it's had stock that it now needs to move over? It's suddenly expedited an enormous pile of releases. Look at the again, I'm treading on my own toes for a future video, but the DS224 is going to see a refresh as the DS225 in like a year. Now that is so not Synology. It's the same hardware with 2.5 gig slammed on it, and this new hardware policy, of course, but the whole thing has felt like a decision has been required internally. Something has happened where they've gone, we've got to get all this out now. And whether that is because the hardware needs to all be level, because it's all similar hardware, perhaps for firmware updates rolling into DSM-8, who knows? But the delivery of this message, for me, if there was one thing, and this really piggybacks on what Frank said, was that they did everything so fast, and it seems like they've garbled too much messaging. And then to go on to Will's point, they've then not done a unified message. So it's been fast, inconsistent, and sporadic. 3 fantastic ingredients to the worst lasagna in the world. But I mean, moving on to the last question. This is a straight one for you, Will. Get ready. You're leading us out, baby. This is, what do you think the long-term impact, if any, of these changes in drive support policy will mean?
I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, more so than anything, I do think genuinely it's opening the avenue for, as you kind of said at the top of this video, they're kind of exiting that prosumer hacker together, like let's just throw something together and see what this thing can do. Market, they're the home lab style thing, that the people who just want to tinker and play around. I think that they are genuinely kind of in the process of saying, hey, we've got all these other contenders out there. We're just not going to fight with that market. We are going to really be going for, let's look for your mid-level consumers who don't really ask questions and just sign a check, who just really want something to work easily, want to be able to call support. They want a unified basic system. And people who are really in the larger enterprise and bigger business level. And I think that's really what they're targeting out. I think honestly, my problem is a lot of my customer base are video production houses and photographers and people who have a whole lot of data needs in hundreds of terabytes, but also do not necessarily have a large IT budget, and kind of hitting that middle ground where Synology has been phenomenal. I think, quite honestly, that market right there is going to be the single most impacted one in terms of like just what I do on a daily basis of, hey, it used to be trivial. Go in, get a DS 1821 Plus, fill it with 20 terabyte hard drives, and you're going to pay like $350 a hard drive for ballpark somewhere in there. And then you're going to have a RAID 6 volume that is enough to support whatever you need in there. Off the top of my head, that's 120 terabytes, maybe? I don't know. And that's the thing, is that was just so easy to do. Once you have the RAID conversion to terabytes, it's 108. Boom, max volume size of that. And it was just so easy to recommend because it's so cost effective. Now, that same unit, you just cannot do those things because you're looking at the 16 terabyte drives. And I don't think Synology's compatibility list is going to be hitting the 18 or 20 terabyte drives even when they do come out, mostly due to the fact that now they're undercutting their own 16 terabyte Plus Series sales. And so I think that's going to be the long-term impact, is just, hey, those people who previously were using Synology all the time because it was honestly really cost effective and you had a great solution, are now going to have to really start looking at other competitors where honestly there was just, in my opinion, not a lot of competition there because Synology was just too easy to recommend for pretty much all of those use cases.
Frank?
I feel like for the biggest pool of people that this impacts is existing, maybe not even existing, but probably home users and, to Will's point, some small businesses. Because the truth is that for enterprises, everything has an end of life. So once the NAS is end of life, the hard drives inside of the NAS are end of life as well. And if they have to buy new, they're not the ones that are going to care that they have to pay $50 more hard drive. It's just nothing in the grand scheme of things. They probably are not even going to think twice about it because in the enterprise space, this is pretty common stuff. In the home user space, where you have existing hard drives, that's where it gets complicated because you're not looking to spend thousands of dollars when you could spend hundreds of dollars. So to go from that perspective, what is going to happen? And my biggest fear in terms of this migration process that they're saying is, I really hope that they build some type of like a key into it, meaning like the serial number is part of the somewhere on of the NAS. The serial number of the NAS that it's migrating from gets written to the serial number to the new NAS so that they know where it came from. And then that NAS is now locked out of migrating any future devices. Because my biggest fear is that there are just going to be people on eBay that are going to be selling new, quote unquote, new drives that are storage pools, RAID 6 or RAID 5, whatever you want, SHR, here you go. And here's a $40 premium. And now you can use whatever drive you want. And it's going to become like a black market for these things because, you know, to Will's point, if you were able to fill out an 1821 Plus as a business with 24 terabyte drives, and now you can only use 16 terabyte drives because those are the only ones that are approved or whatever, you might literally benefit from buying a drive from somebody else configured with a storage pool, or we'll say drives from somebody else configured as a storage pool. And then what happens? Where's the reliability in that? Are we trusting the person that they're actually new drives? Like, I don't know how that's going to work, but I hope that in some capacity, we don't see a rush of like SHR and SHR2 pool drives on eBay where it's like, install them in your new Synology NAS because you'll be able to use whatever hard drives you want. And I hope it's just a one-time upgrade because I think that would just, you know, cause chaos.
At the same time, though, anybody who goes like, it's a Linux system. At the end of the day, somebody's going to figure out the script. You just mdadm add, and I mean, Synology's got a white paper out there on how to build a RAID pool that's got Linux support off of Synology drives and mount it. Like it should not be that hard. I've not got a 925 Plus, but I'm imagining it's not going to be that hard. And for me, those people who are going to do that stuff, who cares? Like they know that they're doing something that is not supported. And so that's on them. And if you want to just assume that hard drives work because normally SATA is a very nice universal protocol. That means that pretty much any hard drive can talk to anything and not really have any issues. I feel like that's totally fine. And just, you're not going to run into those issues because, you know, you're clearly doing something where you're going on it behind the scenes. And if you break it, it's your fault. So I'm actually kind of a fan of leaving those things up. And if people want to start selling that stuff on eBay, it'll be interesting. But I just see it as a 90% filter rather than that last 5 or 10% of people who are going to do those types of things.
Yeah, I'd be okay with them, you know, leaving that open. The only fear I have, and Robbie and Luka would probably, maybe even you too, Will, would probably remember this. There was some loophole with like, I think it was J series drives and like BTRFS volumes or something. And then an upgrade came one day and just like broke a bunch of storage pools and volumes.
Yeah.
I don't remember. So I don't know. If you do that, I don't think there's ever going to be a guarantee that it's not going to break in the future. Whereas if they support migrations and you can buy a migrated drive, I'd imagine they're not going to lock that out. So I completely agree. There are going to be loopholes. There are probably already loopholes. I just wonder exactly what's going to happen if you use that loophole from a long-term reliability perspective. But I agree, it doesn't make sense to lock them out.
Yeah, so many good points here again from both Will and Frank. Um, I definitely agree that Robbie, what you said before, everything feels so rushed, right? But how come they didn't rush on putting out 3300 series larger drives than 16 terabytes, right? Exactly what Will said, right? So I'm kind of also scratching. Yeah. I mean, that was spot on. That was spot on. And something that I was thinking for the past, intensively for the past 2 weeks when all this hit, I said to myself, so that probably means that larger drives are coming, right? Because why would you, exactly what Frank and Robbie, what you said, why would you enforce this policy on a 2-bay drive, right? On a 225, all the way to a 8-bay or 28-bay or whatever, right? If you're not planning on loading up of allowing users more capacity drives, right? Because immediately if somebody wants a 20 terabyte drive, they need to go to the 5300 and nope, thank you. That's way too much expensive for a home user, right? For instance, I'm not going into anyone's pocket, but I'm just saying. So my personal point of view, we will see new 3300 drives probably soon, maybe, not sure. Also, one more point on the drives. For the past 5 years, Synology has done nothing on the consumer SSDs, right? So the 5200 is, again, the only drive available. And what happens now, or from that leak that you mentioned a month ago or 2 months ago now, we've seen the slim version, right? The 620 Slim. So 620 Slim is coming out probably, and that's a 2.5 inch NAS. So what happens? So you're going to fill that with enterprise drives, right? No, that's not going to happen, right? So I have a gut feeling, okay? So that probably will see higher capacity 3300 drives and potentially SATA SSDs for the consumer grade as well. And one more thing that Will mentioned, all this hacking and loopholes and whatnot, and what Frank said just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, people might actually start doing that, right? Selling preloaded drives on eBay. I haven't even thought about it, okay? And I'm on the Balkans, right, where we steal stuff. Okay, so what I wanted to say was...
Self-xenophobia, that's rare.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, again, what Will started... I'm probably, I definitely agree with Will. People are not going to gamble with buying a Synology hardware that's always lagging behind against the competition, right? They're probably going to spend more. Now they're probably buying, let's say, proprietary drives in a way that sometimes are more expensive than the competition. And then they're going to risk not having any support, right? That just doesn't fly with me, right? Okay. So if we set that aside, one more thing that kind of crossed my mind, and because I have zero input on any financial elements of Synology's business, is that maybe this was rushed for a number of things. But one thing that kind of crossed my mind was how much profit are they actually getting from this range of Plus devices, right? Maybe they're not even having enough of profit compared to drive sales and the higher tier elements, higher tier devices, right? So maybe over the years they said, look, we're going to keep that, we're going to lock it down, and now these Plus models, exactly what Will said, we're going to push even easier to smaller businesses, right? Because in Croatia here, you're not going to see a mid-sized business, right, buying left and right HD units, 6500 or something like that. That's just not in the budget, right? But you will definitely see a 8-bay, 5-bay, Plus models, exactly, again, what Will said. And with this new policy, there's basically a kind of an appliance approach to it. And maybe, again, that's actually what Synology wants, right? As a negative side, turning their backs onto enthusiasts and onto us that like to tinker around and push the hardware. But again, they're like, true and steady. They're always lagging behind in hardware, not because Intel or AMD are not producing new CPUs, right? So it's intentional. It's intentional for the past decade, right? And definitely somebody in HQ there said, look, we're going to do it our own way, our own pace. And closed systems is nothing new. There are multiple leading companies, tech companies in the world, which are closed, right? Closed ecosystem, and that works. And that's not an easy thing to do. Asus tried it, they failed. So it's not a relatively easy thing to do. And Synology is slowly going where they want to go. And we're just seeing a new milestone and a new Synology from what we've known for the past 20 years.
I mean, the only thing I would add to it, really, like with regards to the future, and again, you mentioned the profitability of the Plus series. I touched on that at the beginning, but also, again, kudos to the brand for it. I mentioned in other videos that they've managed for that 4-bay, we're just going to focus on the 925 Plus, that has been around 550 Nika every iteration, every 2.5 years for more than a decade. With everything else going up and down, it's still maintained that 550 Nika price tag every single time, with a tiny increase or decrease. We are talking 10 to 12 Nika or something like that. So I understand the profitability of that system has clearly almost certainly gone down, hence why the level of expenditure towards hardware almost certainly was impacted by that. But the idea that this is going to be a way to reintroduce and add more value for them and for the end user for the Plus series moving forward, I think we have to at least all agree that there are going to be fewer units sold this generation. I think that's inevitable. And I do wonder about the offset between those two stockpiles of, we sold all of this, but it didn't sell at a loss, but we barely made a profit. Or we're going to sell less units, but with drives included. But again, we're only getting a profit margin. We don't make the full whack on those drives. So I wonder if this is something that they're going to pull off, whether it's a gamble or if it really is an incredibly well thought out, methodical plan. And as for another thing for the future that I haven't heard many people talk about, I worked in e-retail for quite a long time. This sounds awful. If I was still working in e-retail and I was looking forward to selling the new Synology devices and suddenly I can't upsell Seagate, WD, any of the other, and that extends to the SSDs as well, where a lot of customers are very brand loyal with SSDs, more than hard drives, I would argue. I do wonder how many people in sales teams are going to be slightly ick about upselling a Synology when, as you mentioned earlier on, Will, with the increase in that price tag, yes, the higher generations aren't going to worry, but I wonder about the impact of this long term with those saleswomen, 2025 people, or those people that were wondering about recommending this device to other people. I think that word of mouth is being overlooked in favour of, well, they've got this big plan moving forward, and maybe this is the end of the Plus series. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I mean that insofar as Synology might think this is the last hurrah for the Plus series. We roll out DSM 8 in the next couple of years, and because all the hardware's the same, we all tie the ribbon off on those moving forward. That might be the end of the Plus series. Again, purely my own opinion and my observations, but unless you guys have got anything else to add, I think we've taken up enough of everyone's time. Have you got anything to add, chaps?
Oh, I
think
talk
we're
for
good.
Hours, but I probably got to get off.
Oh, well, do you know what, guys? Thanks so much for joining us today. Let us know what you thought in the comments. There'll be links to everyone else's videos, articles, and more. But I thank you so much again for joining me for today, lads. And have yourselves and you at home a wonderful week.